So what qualifies you to be a leader, a winner, someone who has a certain level of success? What is the qualification metric? And that's what I want to dig into in this video for a number of reasons, but predominantly because something super cool happened recently. So I'll share with you the super cool thing in a moment, but let me start by sharing with you a very simple story. So 2 or 3 days ago, I'm scrolling on social media and I see a very interesting post. And the post had, I think it was four black men's hands. And it was just a picture of these 4 black men's hands with different kinds of accessories on them. One hand had a few rings and a watch. Another hand had a ring and a phone. Another hand was absolutely plain, nothing on it whatsoever. And there was a 4th hand with some ensemble of things. And the caption in the post on social media said, which of these hands is the hand of the billionaire? Okay. And there were all these interesting answers inside of the comments. And one of the answers that really actually got my attention was an answer from a lady. And what she actually wrote, she wrote none of them because none have a manicure, right? None were manicured, which I thought was extremely funny, right? But none of the hands really looked like they weren't manicured, but I still thought it was a good point. So my comment on that post, which I then later saw was also echoed by a few other people, was the hand with nothing on it. Nothing, no watch, no ring, nothing, no phone in the hand was the hand of the billionaire. And then I explained why. I said, because a true billionaire understands that his identity, who he is, his hashtag fingerprint, if we want to use that as a conceptual idea, is more valuable than any other brand he can promote. It's more valuable than any other brand he brings to the table. It's more valuable than any other brand he decides to partner with. Now, the reason why this is so relevant when we talk about this topic of what qualifies you to succeed or what qualifies you to win or what qualifies you to be able to go and get the things you desire to get. So specifically on this channel, many of the videos I've done in the past are about creating cash flow, and first and foremost, creating cash flow that's consistent so you can replace your income. And then secondarily, creating cash flow that is colossal so you can live in ways you've never even planned to be able to live, right? And the reason why this is so important is because when you think about what qualifies you, if you don't have a clear understanding of an answer to the question of what qualifies you to be able to win, then that equally means you probably don't have a clear understanding of what disqualifies you from being able to win. And if you're not clear on what qualifies you to be able to win and you're not clear on what disqualifies you to be able to win, then you're most likely not going to win, because winners don't win by accident. I want you to think about that, all right? So let's jump into this. Let me tell you now the story, right? So earlier today, I was in the barbershop, and as you can see, looks clean, right? And in the most recent video I did yesterday, I was talking about how sometimes we can feel self-conscious. And I was talking about how as I started doing these daily sets of videos, I started to feel a little bit self-conscious. And I started to ask myself, am I sure I'm going to get on camera even without a haircut and all of these kind of things, right? And I spoke about in that video how there is a simple, single, smallest key, which is the master key to open the largest, biggest, boldest doors, right? And again, for those of you who haven't seen that video, you can go and watch the video linked right here. Okay, I'll attempt to link it here so you can go watch that. But here's the key. Coming off the back of that video, I was in the barbershop today. It was a little bit before I cut my hair. And I'm going to talk in a moment about the impact and the power of just simply having a haircut, right? And I was introduced to another gentleman inside of the barbershop. Now, this gentleman is probably, by my estimation, around 12 to maybe 15 years younger than myself. And this gentleman, I was told, works in the field of property. Okay, so I ended up speaking with this gentleman. And obviously, those of you who've been on my page for a while, you will know that I've been doing property since the age of 19 when I first worked as an estate agent, and then et cetera, in various different capacities since then. So this young man shares that he works in an estate agency, which is absolutely amazing. So I literally get excited. We start talking, we start getting into it. Now, some of you who have really deeply watched some of the content on my on my YouTube channel, you will know that I don't often speak well of estate agents, right? Probably because I used to be one. But it's interesting having a conversation with someone about an industry that you don't really feel or you don't really think too confidently or positively about. Okay, so long story short, we're having this conversation about estate agencies and estate agents and his role, and he says to me that he's been an estate agent for about 10 years. So that would tell me that he was around, most likely just under 30. So I was probably right about 12 13 years younger than myself. Okay, so here's where this gets interesting. After we start talking a little bit, I think, I could be wrong, all right? And this is my interpretation. So actually, let me leave my interpretation out because I don't want to overreach in terms of the information I'm sharing with you, right? So let's do this. If you desire for me to share what I thought, then let me know in the comments below. Just write, Samuel, share your thoughts, okay? And then I'll literally circle back, either do another video, or at least in the comments I'll definitely expand. But if not, if I think I need to go deeper, I'll do another video and break it down. So long story short, we start talking. And then after we start talking, I had an element of excitement about the fact that this is a young guy who's working in an estate agency, has been working in an estate agency for 10 years. And at one point in the conversation, I made a statement. One of the statements I made was, he reminds me of me, okay? And he asked, how so? And I mentioned I used to work in an estate agency, and he asked how old was I, and I said I was 19, and he said he actually started working in an estate agency when he was 17. So we had this interesting rapport moment, right? And then a little while after speaking on that specific part of the conversation, I noticed him checking me out, okay? And I'm saying this because as we think about the conceptual idea of what qualifies you to be successful, this moment for me that happened earlier on today inside of the barbershop was the wake up moment for me, which said, Samuel, you have to talk on this topic today. So I already planned to potentially touch this topic today, but I didn't plan to make this whole video about this topic today, probably because, as I shared previously in my yesterday's video, that I feel as though a lot of this has become mindset, and the plan wasn't for it to be mindset, but it ends up being mindset. And I'm like, why is it all mindset? All right, so let's go deeper into that. So I see him checking me out. Now, when I say checking me out, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to articulate what I mean, okay? The first thing I saw him do is scan my watch, okay? So I watched him kind of look at my watch a certain way, like try to see what watch I was wearing, okay? I later saw when he came and sat next to me that he was wearing a Rolex, okay? And I then saw him kind of attempt to scan a few other things, okay? So now you know what I mean when I say checking me out, okay? So just so that there's full clarity in the information I'm sharing. So I started watching him check me out. He checked kind of like 3 or 4 things on me, like detailed, like he was just looking, right? Now, at the time we were talking, we were engaging in back and forth conversation. There was a dialogue going on. So I assume he didn't think that I could see him specifically trying to, scan certain things, right? And it's interesting, not because I'm not 27 anymore. It's interesting because it caused me to think about what people utilize to determine qualifications for them to be able to be open to learn. Now, you may have been in this situation before where you're in a predicament, someone's talking to you, what they're saying sounds super valuable, but you recognize that what they're saying is countercultural. It's different to what you've been doing. It's different to how you've been thinking. And you end up having to make a decision there and then. And that decision is, should I listen to them? Should I be open to them? Should I continue to take on board what they are saying and potentially even utilize it to rewrite and rewire what I've been thinking and what I've been saying? Okay. So I feel like it was one of those moments for this young gentleman. It was one of those moments where he was hearing some stuff which didn't necessarily sit well with what he had learned as an estate agent, but he could see the value in it by being an estate agent, but was questioning, hold on a minute, can this guy be right? And in order for him to get to a place where he could determine whether I was qualified to help him further win, I felt like that's where he took it upon himself to start scanning, to start checking me out, right? Now, this is super beautiful for multiple reasons. And this is the reason why I started sharing with you in this video the social media post that I engaged with recently, right? Because in that social media post, it was the same thing. It's like someone shares a picture of 4 black men's hands and asks which one's the billionaire, and everyone's going to have an opinion. Everyone's going to have an opinion. But here's the thing that's super cool and maybe something super powerful for us to reflect on and to contemplate, yeah? And that is that the person who is a billionaire is probably the best person who's qualified to determine which of those hands is the hands of a billionaire. Okay? I used to say this thing when I was studying my masters. It was my first masters when I discovered this. So I was studying my masters in statistics at UCL, University College London. And whilst I was studying that masters, there was a day that it dawned on me. It was a powerful life lesson that really just hit me one day. Okay, so this was 2008, 2009. And this lesson just, boom, hit me, and it stuck with me ever since. And the lesson was, the only person who's qualified to help you on a master's is someone who already has a master's. And let me explain to you really quickly how that concept came to me. I was literally working on a specific assignment, a coursework paper, during my master's in statistics year. And I remember it just like it was yesterday. There was about 4 or 5 of us in the, it wasn't a library and it wasn't a common room, but in UCL, I believe it's Gower Street, where we had the statistics labs, you have some rooms that are like clusters, okay? So they're not libraries, but they're quiet areas, and they're not common rooms, but they're rooms where we study, like, let's call them a study room, right? Let's call it a study room. So we're in this study room, and whilst in this study room, there's about 4 or 5 of us who are all students on the same course, and we're talking through how to answer effectively the piece of coursework we're working on. And as we're talking through it, this is what happened. One person said, I think this is how the equation needs to be used to do this specific, to provide this specific solution. Someone else said, oh, I think it's supposed to be done like this. Someone else said, oh, but the lecturer has explained it needs to be done like this. And then I think at the time, maybe I chimed in and said, oh, no, it should be done like this, right? So you've got 4 people, all students on the same course, all basically, quote unquote, qualified to the same degree, all throwing in their 2 pence to try to help one another, maybe even just at the time to try and help me. And as we were all chucking in our 2 pence, it hit me so hard that day. It was like, none of us are qualified to help us because all of us are MSc students. We're masters in science or masters of statistics students on that day. We're not qualified to help us get a master's in statistics. The person that's qualified, the people that are qualified are the PhD students. The people that are qualified are the PhD holders. The people that are qualified are the people that have already got the MSc. So they're qualified to help you. They're qualified to help me. Okay. Now, does that mean that someone who doesn't have an MSc may not be able to bring value to the table? Of course they can bring value to the table. But this specific specialized thing will require someone who specializes in. Right? And that's what I realized that day. And it really stuck to me that day. That in life, if you desire to win, one of the things you should do, one of the things you could do is find people that are adequately qualified. But here is where it gets techie, as some people say, right? But here's where it gets interesting for me. It gets interesting because that day started my journey of realizing that the people that are most qualified to someone who's unqualified often do not look qualified. Okay, I'm going to say that again in case you need to pick up your pen, all right? What dawned on me in 2008, 2009, as I was studying my MSc and that lesson kind of came to me, was the people who are the most qualified often do not look like the most qualified to those who are unqualified. Okay, now, if you want a kind of like deep dive into what I'm talking about, go and get the book called The Millionaire Next Door, which was written by Dr. Danko and Dr. Stanley. Okay, it's not a very old book, but it's an older book. And it's a very well-known book in wealth circles. It's a very well-known book in personal development circles, right? And the book is called The Millionaire Next Door. And one of the central ideas inside of that book, which was really helpful for me when I first read that book, is the fact that most people who are millionaires do not look like what people, the majority of people who are not millionaires, think they look like. And if that's the truth, which I believe it is, not just based on the book The Millionaire Next Door, which really breaks this down with a lot of data and statistics and facts other than just rhetoric, right? Other than just their ideas. But if that is the truth, guess what happens? What happens is it becomes very difficult for a person who wants to start winning. It becomes very difficult for a person who wants to have more success. It becomes very difficult for a person who wants to ascend to a new level, get to a new height in their life, to find people who can help them. And the reason why is because what they perceive are the qualifications, the trappings. For example, I'm wearing a Rolex because last year I made £150,000 in the year, right? So I'm expecting the person who made £485,000 last year, who can help me double my income, to be wearing a more expensive Rolex, okay? Like, that's the logic of checking someone out on certain metrics when you are looking to move further faster in your future and you're unqualified to recognize what the qualification is that can take you to your next level of qualification, okay? And guys, you have to let me know. You have to let me know if this is deep. You have to let me know if this resonates. And if this does resonate, leave a comment down below and just write the words "it does" with whatever your comment is going to be. It does resonate, Samuel, and then whatever your additional comments are going to be, right? But this is what really kind of like hit me today. And it was like, Samuel, you have to do a video on this. And I also have to get comfortable with the fact that many of these videos in this initial set of these daily videos seem to be mindset videos. But one of the things that I got more comfortable about earlier on today, when I was thinking about this, when I was thinking about some of the stuff I shared in the video yesterday, was the simple fact that it's okay. Because a lot of training which people go into, a lot of courses that people get into, they often start with mindset. They often start with mindset stuff, because if we don't think right, we can't act right. If we don't have the right view on a situation, then we can't really truly engage adequately in that situation. So that gave me some comfort earlier on today, as I was just thinking through the video yesterday and realizing to myself, it's cool, like, Samuel, sometimes you do have to start the conversation on the psychology. You do have to start the conversation on the mindset before you start saying to people this and that on A or B or C or D or the tactical aspects. We first have to get through the technical aspects. So again, for those of you who have been rocking with me, if you're getting value and if you're seeing things the same way or a different way, just let me know in the comments below, because I'm always open to discovering and developing and just deciphering a different way of analyzing things. So I'm open to your comments. Now, in order to break this down, because I don't want to leave you hanging, let me give you what for me is the ultimate qualification of someone we should all look to in order for us to win. Okay, so this is where it's going to get super deep. And this is also my qualification for the reason why I choose property, okay, as one of the core key fulcrums of wealth creation in my life. Okay, so let's jump into this. The first one is learning mastery. Okay, learning mastery. If you are trying to check out someone and qualify them as a reasonable and viable asset to you for you to grow in any area of your life. Some of you may know that I started to do jiu-jitsu last year. Okay, I'm still a white belt. Okay, white belt with one stripe. Okay, and I've taken a bit of a break for a few other reasons, but I'll be back. I'll be back in the Arnold Schwarzenegger voice. I'll be back. All right, but the reality is, in jiu-jitsu, I want to make sure that my sensei is someone who has what I call learning mastery. That means they don't just roll, and rolling is the term we use as the activity of doing jiu-jitsu, right? But they don't just roll, they don't just do jiu-jitsu, but they're on a learning mastery journey. So that's the first characteristic. And this is one of the reasons why I advocate to so many people that they should invest in property, just as an example, because property is one of those industries where you can develop mastery over time as long as you are committed to learning. So learning mastery is the first reason. Now, the second thing you should look for as a qualification of someone who you believe can provide or assist you with a forward-thinking transformation is a language mastery. Okay, now I know some of you guys are going to be thinking, oh, Samuel, by language mastery, do you mean they can speak, they're bilingual, they're multilingual, they can speak multiple languages? Not exactly. Okay, when I was a math teacher and also a teacher trainer teaching teachers how to teach, one of the things I would often say is mathematics is its own language. Okay, mathematics is its own language. Now you might be thinking, Samuel, that is crazy. How can mathematics be its own language? I have never gone to a language school and heard them talk about maths as a subject. Okay, well, check this out. I would explain to my students that the reason why so many people in the UK find mathematics hard is because the one thing they weren't taught at the beginning of their math journey is that maths is another language. Now, if you look back in history and you identify people like Albert Einstein, you identify people like Isaac Newton, you identify those amazing scientists. What's interesting is we call those people scientists, but an overwhelming majority of the work they wrote down, they wrote in the language of mathematics. Okay, so how comes they're not called mathematicians? I'll tell you why they're not called mathematicians. Because centuries past, mathematics was seen as the language to convey the intellectual property or the science that you have in your mind. Okay, so math is a language. Mathematics is a language. And when you see it as a language, guess what? Everything changes for you, because you start realizing I can, quote unquote, speak in this language. I can talk in this language. I can talk mathematically, right? I can communicate mathematically. I can engage mathematically. Let's go to a whole nother level. I can have dialogue mathematically, okay? And if you're seeing what I'm talking about, guess what? You can even do that financially, okay? Now, why is this important? It's important because the language of an industry, let's choose property, for example. If someone is skilled in language mastery, what happens is they're able to communicate with you, they're able to communicate with me, even though they're not on the same level as you, even though they're not on the same level as me. All right. I hope this is making like profound sense. I hope this is like really hitting hard, because you have to think about this. Okay. The greatest coach has probably been where you are. So he knows how to tailor make the language to where you are, but also how to bring you up in language to where he is, okay? And that's why language mastery for me is one of the things I want to observe if I'm looking at someone who can develop me. I want them to be able to engage with me where I'm at, but I also want them to be able to bring me up higher to where they're at, okay? Which is where I may not be. So I'll give you a perfect example of this, okay? One of the reasons I advocate people should invest in property is because most of the language of property, over like 70% of the language of property, you already know. Most human beings, whether they've ever invested in property or not, whether they've ever thought about investing in property or not, they already know what rent is. They already know what a mortgage is. Most of them, they already know what a house is. They already know what a flat is. They already know an overwhelming majority of the industry's language. Now, if you take cryptocurrency, for example, most people who are not invested in crypto have no idea what DeFi means, okay? They have no idea what the word decentralized means. They have no idea what blockchain means, or any other one of the specialist terms in that field. But in the field of property, all of us already know a overwhelming majority, at least 50-60% of the language in the industry. So one of the things I say to my students a lot is take advantage of your advantages. And because of the fact that the field of property already has a layup for us in us already knowing over 50% of the language before we even get involved, that assists us on that learning and language mastery. Okay? Hopefully you guys are seeing this. All right, so let's go deeper, right, to the third one. So if I am looking for the qualifications to help me, assist me, and support me to select someone to be of value to me in terms of assisted me to move further faster in my future, to help me to win, I want to make sure that that person has learning mastery, also that they have language mastery in the specific niche or field we're talking about. But then last but not least, and this is probably the most powerful, I also want to make sure that they have what we call leverage mastery. Okay, now you might be thinking to yourself, leverage mastery, Samuel, what is that and how does that work? Okay, so leverage mastery is the ability to pull a it's interesting because as I start thinking about the analogy I'm about to use, it just comes back to me that the easiest analogy to use is the small keys and the big doors analogy that I always use, right? Leverage mastery is the ability to take a small key and use it to open a big door. That's leverage mastery. Leverage mastery is a deep understanding. It's going on a journey of mastery of understanding how to create leverage, how to do small things which create massive outcomes. Now, if you're someone who's been around me for a while, you will know that I often say incremental partnerships, small partnerships, create exponential results, massive results. Incremental partnerships create exponential results. Why? Because when someone has been on a journey of mastery, specifically in the area of leverage, what they get good at is triggering the incremental seeds that produce the exponential trees. So those are the 3 keys I'm going to share with you, which allow you to suss whether someone is qualified to assist you to win. It's not about whether they have a bigger car than you have. It's not about if they have a more expensive house than you have. It's not about if they have the more expensive Rolex than you have, unless you're just looking for someone to help you become exactly who you've already become. Because if you keep doing what you've been doing, you can get a more expensive Rolex. If you keep doing what you've been doing, you probably could get a slightly bigger house. But in order for you to transcend and catapult to new heights and new levels, the person you're looking at and maybe attempting to assess the way you would assess them is automatically not going to be qualified, because the real people that are qualified are not going to look like another version of you. So I'm praying this is extremely valuable to all of you guys who tune into this. If this was valuable to you, what I want you to do is let me know in the comment below. Share your key takeaways, share what stood out to you. And more importantly, I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear what you thought in light of what I've shared. So feel free to share that in the comments here. All right. With that being said, guys, Samuel I Can Win. I'm signing out. Good day. God bless. And please remember that it's small keys that open up big doors. I'll see you on the next one. Let's go.